So the web browser is kind of taking care of us all the data. It is what data it is receiving from the penetration layer. It is displaying that thing properly in our web browser to help us understand in our human way, which is via our own way, like audio, video analysis. Okay, so that's all about the application layer. It's like email client. Let's say when we send out an email to a other friend of us. So what we do, we normally do, we just open the email, compose and write the email, and we just send it out. But the whole architecture, so we are not worried about the inner architecture, that is the other layers. But there are other layers which which is working in the background. But for us, it's just that we use the email client at the layer 7. We don't need to worry about how the data will be transmitted between my computer to and how my friend will be receiving that. We all need to worry about is write a good email, and that's all. And all the things is kind of getting taken care of by the other beneath layers. So thing is, the OSI model is actually crucial for understanding how different layers of a network function together to kind of facilitate the communication. Okay, so it helps us in also troubleshooting network issues, developing network protocols. So the OSI layer will also help us, like you can also utilize this layers concepts to kind of maybe develop or design new protocols. Okay, and it also helps us understand how the data is kind of flowing between two devices. Okay, and one thing is that as a cybersecurity professional, we should be kind of familiar with the OSI model, okay, as it provides us with a foundation for understanding various network attack vectors and security measures that is required at each layer. Okay, so for an example, let's say that the firewall that I told and that is working at transport layer. So firewall protects the transport layer, while encryption secures data at the penetration layer. So the encryption happens at the penetration layer, while the firewall kind of protect the transport layer. So we need to know about all these layers and kind of in a very kind of good way what all the layers mean. And now the thing is that for us as a cybersecurity professionals, since this is not just a networking course, we also need to understand what are the different devices or tools that we can use to kind of read the data from each layers. Okay, not just what we end up seeing in the application layer, but we also need to read the data between each layers and how we can do that. So let's kind of quickly go through that one by one and see how we can read data from each layer, okay, using various devices and tools. Okay, so let's start with the physical layer. Okay, so what we can do, just one second guys. Okay, so physical layer is something what we can do if we want to kind of test out that, okay, what kind of data is going back and forth. So what we can do is, like, we can use, there are different kind of tools like network cable testers. Okay, let's say network testers. Okay, so these are few of the devices, okay, over here. And what you can do is, like, you can just tap it on the wire. So let's say there's a wire between going back and forth between C1 and C2 making connection. So you can just add that device on this wire, and it can kind of tell you that, okay, if there's actual data that is getting transmitted or not between these two devices. And it's very, very important, and it is very, very important to know, because thing is that, let's say you have something like this. So one of the things where it is very, very, very useful is that let's say that there's something gaming. I normally recall from my college days that there were, like, we were setting up certain communication between two different rooms, setting up certain gaming zones. Okay, and now there was a wire which was kind of connecting this router to between this router. Okay, so over there we had actually that device, the network tester, which we would kind of just tap on this device, and we would know that, okay, there was some misconfiguration with the router, and we were not able to kind of establish connection. So this device was actually helpful at that time to kind of understand if there is kind of data transfer that is going back and forth between these devices and this router and this router. It was able to kind of quickly tell us, okay, if the router is working properly or if there's any kind of protocol error because of which. So either is the kind of the wire between these two routers are faulty, or the wire is not faulty. So this was very, very helpful during those times to kind of check out like if there's a communication error, or if there is any kind of software error in the routers by which the data from our computer is not getting sent out, is not received by this computer over here. Okay, so this network tester will be able to help you in kind of understanding if the data is kind of going back and forth between two devices or not. Okay, so it can help you identify cable faults, or it can also help you identify the signal quality over here. Okay, so that's all about the physical layer, how you can kind of read the data from there, and it's very, 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 very useful. You might have also seen in movies where what happens is that the agents actually adds a quick tap on the wire, and it copies the data from there itself. So those all devices actually works at the physical layer. You just add a tap, okay, and whatever data zeros and ones are kind of going back and forth, it will just make a copy out of that, and it will transmit to your own server remotely. So what you can do is like you can just maybe also make it on your own. Like let's say you grab a Raspberry Pi, okay, and there are Raspberry Pi is actually a network device, okay, it's a network device. So what you can do is like Raspberry Pi. So this is actually a kind of a small device which can be used for like different kind of learning purpose. So let's say one of the things that can be used, like you can do kind of something kind of like practical, is that let's say there are two, and there's a wire which is connecting computer 1 and computer 2. So you can kind of establish it, you can make a tap out of that. So what you do is like you just you just cut the wire in the between and connect the Raspberry Pi in between. Let's say the wire that is going out from this computer, you just connect it to Raspberry Pi, and the other end of that wire again goes from the Raspberry Pi and goes to the P, and you kind of run some software by which the data sending out from the P is even though like being sent out to the P, but there's a device which is your own device, is the Raspberry Pi, and what it will do, it will read all the data going back and forth. And what you can do is like once that data is kind of, it will save those data in a buffer at every few seconds, and will transmit the data out to your device, let's say via wireless communication, via mobile network or via Bluetooth, and you can read the data that is kind of going back and forth between two devices without any disturbance between these two computers. Okay, so these are some of the things that you can kind of do play out at the physical layer, and kind of so there are devices like network device testers which you can kind of use to kind of see like if there's any faulty in the wire, like if the wire is kind of itself broken in between, okay, or then also kind of test out signal quality. So that's all about kind of understanding how you can kind of read the data at the physical layer. Okay, now let's see how you can read the data at the data link layer. Okay, so network switches and packet sniffers, and packet sniffers are like Wireshark, can help you kind of analyze the data actually at the data link layer. So one of the thing is that let's say, let me just quickly start this run next. Okay, so it will take some time. In the meantime, we'll continue our discussion. Okay, so in the data link layer, how we can kind of see what kind of data is going back and forth. So so one of the thing is, let's say you have computer C1, okay, C1, it's computer 1, and then there's a router in between, okay, or let's say switch in between, and then let's say there's C2, okay. For easier example, let's say there's a router in between, and this is a wireless router, okay, and C1 via wireless is kind of connected to C2, and how you can kind of read the data between the data link layer, over here, that the data is kind of getting transmitted, handled by the data link layer of this computer and this computer. What you can do is you can come up with a new computer, let's say